Michael returned home late after his workout, just as the golden rays of the setting sun were beginning to yield to the coolness of the evening. He opened the door to his family home, a house that had become quiet and somewhat desolate ever since his father's death 5 years ago. Inside, the familiar atmosphere of solitude permeated the space, a deep silence broken only by the creak of the floorboards under his feet and the occasional echo of distant city noise filtering through the windows. Every detail of that home resonated within his soul. Along the corridor, where once voices and laughter had filled the air, now reigned a silent emptiness. Remembering his father, Michael felt both the pain of loss and a strange sense of comfort. Here, among the familiar pieces of furniture, time seemed to stand still, allowing him to once again immerse himself in memories of the past. Warm recollections intertwined with bitter reality in his thoughts, creating the impression that the house held within it both the joy and the sorrow of loss. He climbed the stairs toward his room, where the walls, once painted in vibrant colors, now appeared faded. On the table lay an old photograph of his father, in which his father smiled with unchanging kindness. Michael ran his fingers along the cold surface of the frame, sinking into memories that, like a soft whisper, beckoned him back to those days when the house was full of life. After his shower, when the hot water washed away his fatigue, Michael sat down in his modest living room. Here, time flowed slowly. Every movement, every sound, even the flickering of the lamp on the wall, seemed to remind him that he was alone in this world. He sat on the worn sofa, gazing thoughtfully out the window, through which the light of street lamps and the penetrating silence of the night filtered in. In that silence, Michael tried to find answers to the questions that tormented his soul. Why does the solitude that has become his constant companion bring not only pain but also a strange freedom? Why does every moment spent in this house remind him of days gone by while also opening up the possibility for change? Michael's inner monologue unfolded slowly, like a quiet stream mixing feelings of sadness, nostalgia, and a faint premonition of something new. He understood that this house, though filled with echoes of the past, was becoming the arena for his personal transformation. Here, in solitude, he was learning to listen to the voice of his heart, allowing himself to dream of a future where loneliness would give way to genuine connection and love. Thus began yet another evening in Michael's world, a night when silence and emptiness seemed not to be enemies, but quiet witnesses to his inner search and the budding of hope. Every step he took, every touch of objects laden with memories, echoed deep within his soul, hinting that change was inevitable and that solitude might be the beginning of something new and significant. After his shower, still enveloped in steam and freshness, Michael put on his comfortable shirt and headed to the living room, expecting the usual quiet of solitude. However, as soon as he crossed the threshold, his gaze fell upon an unfamiliar yet somehow familiar face. On the sofa, in the soft glow of the evening lights, sat Lydia, a long-time, though always somewhat enigmatic, family friend. Her presence here was as unexpected as it was peculiar. Lydia, around 35 years old, appeared both gentle and resolute. She was dressed in a light, pastel-toned robe that accentuated her refined figure, and her deep brown eyes sparkled with both anxiety and an implicit hope. Soft curls of her light hair fell freely over her shoulders, lending her an air of particular softness and mystery. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, feeling a surge of a whole gamut of emotions, wonder, slight embarrassment, and a growing premonition of something fateful. The silence in the living room seemed filled with unspoken words. Lydia's look, her quiet, almost hesitant gesture of the hand, as if inviting him to step into her world where every movement was deliberate, every word a promise of change. Noticing his presence, Lydia slowly lifted her gaze. A flicker of nervousness passed through her eyes, and a quiet but firm voice broke the silence. "Michael, I need to talk to you." Her words, sounding like a whisper, awakened in him the sense that he was about to witness something far greater than a mere unexpected visit. Still reeling, Michael took a few tentative steps toward her. With every step, his inner dialogue questioned, "Why is Lydia here? What message does she want to convey to me?" The room was imbued with an unusual, almost magnetic atmosphere, where every touch, every glance, became invisible threads binding their souls. Lydia slowly rose. Her movements were fluid, as if she consciously strove to preserve the silence of the moment. She extended her hands, slightly trembling yet determined, as if trying to express the full depth of her inner world. "Michael, she began, then, gathering her strength, continued. "I didn't come here by chance. Over the past few months, I have felt the unbearable emptiness in this house and in my soul. After the loss, after everything changed, I sought support, warmth, and in you I found something I could never quite explain before." In her voice there was a quiet sincerity, and every word Lydia spoke penetrated deeply into Michael's heart, awakening long-forgotten feelings and hope for change. He felt that this unexpected visit was not a mere coincidence, but a sign of fate, a call to open a new chapter in his life. For a moment, silence reigned, charged with emotional tension. Delicate, almost imperceptible glances and gestures filled the space between them, creating the sense that every movement, every emotion, held profound meaning. In this magical, almost mystical exchange of souls, both Michael and Lydia realized that their lives were about to change forever. That evening had begun when the ordinary home, filled with echoes of past losses, became the arena for budding hope and the promise of new, unknown changes. In the living room, still echoing with the memory of Lydia's unexpected visit, Michael and she sat facing each other like two confused leaves caught in a stream of memories and vague expectations. The atmosphere was electrified. Every pause between their words seemed filled with unspoken emotions and conflicting feelings. Lydia, looking into Michael's eyes, began to speak in a soft, trembling voice, as if afraid to disturb the fragile balance of the moment. "Michael, I know my request might seem unexpected, but I have felt so alone since the loss, and I sense that in you there is a light capable of dispelling the darkness of my days." Lydia's words, imbued with the pain of loss and sincere hope, penetrated Michael's heart. He heard not only a plea for support in them, but also a call from a soul tormented by its own vague doubts and inner struggles. His thoughts, like tangled threads, spun around memories of the past, of losses that had forever altered his life, and of the silence that now surrounded his home. Michael remained silent for a long while, trying to gather the strength to express what tormented his inner world. His voice was initially quiet, then, with growing resolve, he said, "Lydia, I understand your pain. But I feel that something is changing between us, that our souls have long been seeking answers to questions that seem unsolvable." In his voice there was a blend of regret and inner conflict. He recognized the weight of his loneliness, yet he was also afraid to take a step toward the unknown. For every new feeling carried the risk of shattering the delicate equilibrium he had so carefully maintained. He recalled his losses, past mistakes, and sensed the internal battle between his desire to help Lydia and the fear of losing himself. Noticing the deep turmoil in his eyes, Lydia softly said, "Sometimes I feel that we create our own destiny, Michael. Every word, every movement is a chance for a new life, even if it is filled with pain. I was so burdened that I stopped feeling alive. And now, looking at you, I'm beginning to believe that perhaps change is possible." In that moment, Lydia's words became a mirror in which Michael saw reflections of his own fears and hopes. His heart began to beat faster, and his inner voice started to argue loudly with his reason. He thought about how long he had lived in silence, how his loneliness had become routine, and now, for the first time, he felt the possibility of change that could shatter those old bonds. A silence fell between them, a silence filled not only with the echoes of past losses but also with a vague premonition of change. Every movement, every glance, acquired a special significance. Hands barely touching seemed like quiet promises, and hesitant sighs, signals marking the beginning of a long-awaited transformation. Inside, Michael wrestled with conflicting feelings. His mind shouted for him to maintain control, while his heart insisted that perhaps it was time to let go and trust the emotions that had been suppressed for so many years of solitude. In his mind, memories, fears, and uncertainty about the future merged, yet through that chaos, a spark of hope emerged, promising a new life where love and support might heal the wounds of the past. Thus, in that quiet, tense room, Michael and Lydia found themselves at a crossroads. Their words and glances, full of conflicting emotions, became the starting point of a journey that promised to change them both. Deep down, Michael knew that to take that step, he would have to confront his most intimate fears and accept the inevitable changes. That night, when words could no longer convey the full spectrum of emotions, something happened between Michael and Lydia that both sensed was inevitable and fateful. The soft rustle of the evening wind, seeping through the half-open windows, became a quiet accompaniment to their mutual silence. Their eyes, filled simultaneously with apprehension and unbridled desire, met, and in that silent exchange, all barriers between them began to vanish. Lydia drew closer, as if driven by an inner impulse, and her hand gently touched Michael's. That almost imperceptible contact, charged with electricity, awakened a whole universe of sensations within him. In her touch, Michael felt the warmth of solace mingled with a thirst for change, a feeling that this very moment had the power to shatter the chains of loneliness and pain. In the room, where restrained sadness had once reigned, everything suddenly shimmered with new colors. The lamp's light cast soft shadows on their faces, highlighting every wrinkle and every glimmer of emotion. Michael noticed how Lydia leaned slightly forward, her eyes sparkling in the half-darkness, and in that gaze he saw not only a longing for the past but also a quiet hope for a future where the pain of loss would yield to the joy of mutual understanding. As if yielding to an unknown force, their bodies began to move in time with an invisible music that only their hearts could hear. Every touch was imbued with meaning. The light, almost trembling caress of fingertips turned into a sincere confession, and a tender embrace became a quiet promise to remain together even in the darkest moments. Their breaths merged, creating a rhythm that seemed eternal, as if time itself had slowed down, allowing them to savor each second. Michael felt his inner world, long encased in the coldness of solitude, beginning to melt under the heat of this passion. In every gesture from Lydia, he found comfort, in every look from her, a quiet admission that life could be different. He realized that these moments were not merely a physical union, but a deep plunge into the most intimate corners of the soul, where tenderness, sincerity, and the desire to be understood reigned. Lydia, sensing that Michael was giving himself to her completely, allowed herself to dissolve into the moment. Her movements grew more confident, and her voice became a soft whisper that conveyed the depth of her feelings. She murmured almost inaudibly, "Sometimes I wish time would stop, so that we could preserve the purity of this moment forever." Her words sounded like a prayer, a promise made to herself and to the one standing beside her. A true explosion of passion erupted between them. In that torrent of feelings, there was no room for fear or doubt. Everything they needed was to allow themselves to be genuine, to forget past grievances and the pain that had long held them captive. Every touch, every kiss became a revelation, capable of erasing the boundaries between souls, giving them the chance to experience what had once seemed impossible. The room was filled with an indescribable unity, the softness of the silk fabrics, the gentle shimmer of light, and the barely perceptible aromas of the night intertwined in a harmonious symphony, where the physical and the spiritual merged as one. Michael and Lydia, like two lost travelers, had finally found in each other what they had long been searching for: warmth, understanding, and the strength to be authentic. Yet, deep within each of them, an awareness was growing. This moment, so wild and unrestrained, had become a turning point, changing them forever. They understood that by opening up to one another, they were taking responsibility for what would come next. But that night, beneath the tender glow of the moon and the quiet whisper of the wind, everything seemed possible, even if the road ahead would be winding and full of uncertainties. Thus, in the whirlwind of passion and sincere emotions, Michael and Lydia allowed themselves to surrender to the moment, forgetting all their fears and doubts. Their bodies spoke a language understood only by their hearts, and every second of that magical union became proof that even in the most forbidden moments, one can find light and hope for change. When morning arrived, it came quietly, as if trying to soften the storm of emotions from the night before. In the gentle light of the first rays of sun streaming through the large living room windows, Michael slowly awoke from a sleep filled with vivid and unsettling images. Even under the lingering effects of sleep, his thoughts kept returning to the magical yet simultaneously disquieting moments when he and Lydia had surrendered to passion, forgetting all their fears and doubts. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, feeling how the warmth of the night's embraces gradually gave way to the cold reality of the new day. The silence in the house, which had become so familiar over the years, was now filled with the echo of his inner turmoil. Every touch, every sound, everything resonated within his soul, leaving invisible marks that could not be erased. He felt a quiet but persistent struggle emerging within him. On one hand, the pleasant sensation of liberation and mutual understanding, and on the other, the heavy burden of responsibility for what had transpired and the fear of the future. Lydia, still somewhat drowsy but already aware of the magnitude of what had happened, sat by the window, gazing into the space where the city was gradually awakening. Her face was pale from the morning freshness, yet her eyes revealed the depth of her emotions, as if she were searching for answers to the questions that had arisen after their torrid union. She spoke not a word, letting the silence speak for her. In her quiet, there were unspoken questions about the price of what they had done and whether they could return to normal life without losing themselves in the whirlwind of emotions. Rising from the bed, Michael approached Lydia. He slowly sat down next to her, and between them a silence fell, heavy with profound thoughts and inner struggle. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Lydia, I still can't believe this happened." His words were filled not only with astonishment but also with deep apprehension. He recalled how the passion of the night had washed away the boundaries between the past and the present, how every kiss and every touch had seemed to unveil his hidden emotions. But now, with morning's arrival, reality once again demanded its price for that freedom, and Michael felt every thought pressing down on his heart. Lydia turned to him, her eyes moist with tears, and softly said, "I know, Michael. I know that every moment of that night has left a mark on our souls. But I do not regret anything, for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. Although, sometimes it seems to me that these feelings might prove too heavy for both of us." Her words, spoken with evident pain and fear of an unknown future, made Michael pause. He felt how conflicting emotions still raged inside him, from gratitude for the moments of true closeness to the fear that they had crossed an invisible boundary that had once kept their world in balance. Images of the past flashed through his mind, warm memories but also the pain of loss, and he understood that now every action would have its consequences. Slowly, as if compelled by unseen forces, Michael rose and walked to the mirror in the hallway. His gaze was full of doubts and internal struggle. He saw his reflection, tired yet determined, bearing deep traces of what he had endured, as if every wrinkle told a story of his inner quest and pain. He realized that the passion which had brought them such joy had now turned into a burden of responsibility. Every morning after that night filled with unbridled desires became a test, one that could either strengthen their souls or forever shatter that fragile thread that had bound them. Returning to the living room, Michael sat down again next to Lydia. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, mutual apprehension and uncertainty were evident. He quietly continued, "Lydia, I want to believe that it all wasn't in vain. That this night wasn't just a flash of passion, but the beginning of something that will help us understand who we really are. But how do we live with this? With this awareness that every emotion, every choice we make will change us forever?" Her hand gently touched his, and in that simple gesture, Michael felt support, but also the realization that their path would now be filled with difficulties and internal trials. Lydia replied, "Maybe we just need to give ourselves time. Time to sort out our feelings, to understand what we truly want, and to accept all the consequences. We both know that we can't bring back the past, but the future, it is open to us, if we learn to live with it." Thus, in the quiet of early morning, amid the soft light and the gentle breath of the city, Michael and Lydia began to realize the price that must be paid for moments of true intimacy. Their souls, filled with conflicting emotions, could no longer return to their former state. Every touch, every glance had become a reminder that passion and love demand sacrifice, and that true freedom comes only through accepting one's mistakes and being willing to move forward despite the pain and losses. That early morning silence became a time of realization for them, realization that the consequences of the previous night would haunt them every day, and that only through sincere acceptance of their feelings and mutual support could they find a path to a new beginning. In that silent accord, Michael and Lydia understood that change had already come, and that their lives would never be the same. When the new day dawned, the morning light streamed through the large windows, bathing the room in soft golden hues, as if foretelling change. Michael and Lydia, sitting in the quiet living room, felt that the past was forever behind them, while ahead stretched a path full of uncertainty and new possibilities. The air was filled with a quiet determination, mixed with a light excitement and trembling anticipation of the inevitable choice ahead. Michael, still feeling the echoes of the night in every fiber of his being, looked out the window where the city was beginning to awaken. His gaze was weary but resolute, as if he knew that change was an inseparable part of life. He slowly turned to Lydia, whose eyes reflected both deep sorrow and hope at once. In the silence of the room, broken only by the soft sound of the street, they both understood that they had a choice to make, one that could determine their future. "Lydia," Michael said in a quiet but confident voice, "I have long sought solace in solitude, afraid to open up to the world and embrace change. But now, having experienced that night, I feel that it's time to start anew. We cannot go back to the past, but we can try to build something new, even if the road is difficult." Lydia lowered her gaze to her clasped hands, then slowly lifted her eyes, filled with sincerity and trembling emotion. "I too have suffered for so long from loneliness, from a sense of loss," she said, her voice trembling as if reflecting a deep inner struggle. "That night was a revelation for me. I realized that we deserve to be happy, even if it means taking a risk and stepping toward change. But I also understand that challenges lie ahead. We must be prepared to accept not only joy but also the pain, the price that sometimes must be paid for true closeness." A silence fell between them, filled with meaningful glances and unspeakable emotions. For a moment, it seemed that the whole world had shrunk to two hearts beating in unison, each ready to surrender to fate and seek redemption through love and mutual understanding. Michael slowly stood and walked over to his small writing desk where his journal lay. He carefully opened it to a random page and, as if writing the first line of a new chapter of his life, he quietly said, "Let this page be the beginning of our new journey, where we learn to forgive the past and build the future on sincerity and support." Lydia nodded, her eyes sparkling with determination and gentle acceptance. They rose together and, like two travelers ready to set off into the unknown, extended their hands to one another. Every gesture, every small detail, from the tender touch to the quiet kiss, became a symbol of a new reality in which the past no longer ruled their hearts, and the future remained a blank slate waiting to be filled with new stories. Outside, the city continued to awaken, carrying the promise of a new day, while within their souls the understanding grew that change was inevitable. This moment became a quiet covenant for Michael and Lydia. They chose to walk together, despite fears and doubts, ready to embrace both the joys and the hardships that life would bring. Their hearts, tempered by the whirlwind of passion and trials, were full of hope for redemption and the possibility of finding true love, love capable of healing even the deepest wounds of the past. And so, beneath the first light of the new day, Michael and Lydia made their choice, a choice that would change their lives forever, opening the path to a new, uncharted, but deeply desired reality.